This is live from New Delhi. You're watching TT India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and coming up in the next hour. In France, first round of polling to elect 577 members of the country's National Assembly underway. National Rally Party far-right eyes historic win. Second round likely to take place on July 7th. Israeli forces intensify operations in Gaza amid clashes. US envoy inspects aid facilities at Rafah border crossing, while Pentagon pauses Gaza pair operations, citing logistical challenges. India's Prime Minister addresses first Mann Ki Baat radio address in the third term, congratulates Election Commission on peaceful completion of electoral process, also introduces hashtag Cheer for Bharat for Paris Olympics. And India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar holds talks with Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman bin Jassim Al Thani. Discussions on expanding bilateral cooperation in areas of trade, investment and energy. We begin with the polls in France, where the first round of polling to elect 577 members of the country's National Assembly is underway. The National Rally Party far-right has eyed historic win, and the second round is likely to take place on 7th of July.
France voted in the first round of a snap parliamentary election that could usher in the country's first far-right government since World War II, a potential sea change at the heart of the European Union.
It was a bit early, but it had to be done because you cannot say with the uncertainty of a quarter for the different parties.
French far-left politician Jean-Luc Mélenchon cast his vote in the first round of French parliamentary election on Sunday. France's left-wing parties have united in the election in an effort to block the far-right's path to power. French President Emmanuel Macron cast his vote. French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal also voted for this all-important election. French far-right leader Marine Le Pen cast her vote. Le Pen and her far-right National Rally Party have taken centre stage in France's parliamentary poll campaign after they trounced President Emmanuel Macron's party in the early June European elections. Former French President François Hollande, who is running to be a lawmaker for the newly formed left-wing New Popular Front alliance, also cast his vote. French far-right National Party leader Jordan Bardella exercised his franchise. The participation rate in France's first round of legislative elections was at 25.9% at noon, up significantly compared to the previous legislative polls in 2022, equivalent to 18.43%, according to the French Interior Ministry. The polls opened at 6 a.m. GMT and will close at 1600 GMT in small towns and cities, with an 1800 GMT finish in the bigger cities when the first exit polls for the night and seat projections for the decisive second round a week later are expected. Bureau Report, DD India.
William Danslow is joining us live from Paris. To begin with, William, hi out there. What is the latest on polling progression percentage? What's the latest on ground?
Well, just about half an hour ago or so, we've heard from the Interior Ministry have released their second update on voter turnout. Now, what it reveals is that turnout at 5 p.m. local time was up at around 59%. Now, putting that into context, that is 20% higher than we saw in 2022. Okay. That is also the highest voter turnout we've seen in France since the 1980s. This comes in an election that campaigning's only lasted for 3 weeks, and analysts are saying is potentially the most consequential since the 1950s. What this high voter turnout actually means when it comes to who will be the winners and the losers in this first round of voting, we'll have to wait till the polls close at 8 p.m. When we get a sense of the exit polling.
Will that also mean that these are the indications of some sort of clear sense of resentment against the current President Macron? We have seen the results in the European polls. Experts have already called it a gamble, calling these snap elections. But the figures that you're citing, does it augur bad news for Macron?
We saw in the European elections just 3 weeks ago or so that French President Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party saw a real hammering in the polls. The National Rally, the right-leaning group here in France, did about twice as well as the centrist group in the European elections. That triggered Emmanuel Macron to call this snap election, saying that it was up to the French people to have a choice, essentially whether the same politics that they voted for at the European level, whether they want that at the domestic level as well. Campaigning has been furious for the last few weeks. The National Rally campaigning hard on an anti-immigration stance. As far as the Renaissance and the opponents of the National Rally are concerned, really trying to pressure voters, arguing that the National Rally is a vote for a pro-Russia, pro-Kremlin party. So it'll be very interesting to see just how indeed all these issues have resonated in the minds of voters, but we won't get a sense of exactly how this campaigning transpired until after voting closes.
Okay, so these could be the reasons that you've spelled out, attributing to Marine Le Pen's party's prominence and their overall popularity. So they're comfortably, climbing the popularity chart in these polls there in France. Williams?
Well, what we've seen in France at the European elections was that there was a strong demand for something different in French politics. We saw the National Rally performing very strongly in the European elections, but across Europe, not just in France, there is a very different dynamic historically for the reasons people vote in the European elections versus domestically. For a European election, many people across Europe see it as an opportunity to show their dismay, their distrust for the National Party, without it having as much personal, direct relevance at the national level. So it'll be very interesting to see whether this is part of a wider trend or whether the European elections was just an opportunity for French voters to show their displeasure with the politics of the centrist bloc, or whether, when push comes to shove, whether they still want a more centrist candidate going forward. So very interesting to see what exactly the polling reveals when voting closes in less than 3 hours' time.
Okay, we'll have to see what really happens in these last lap of 3 hours. Thank you very much, Williams, for joining us live from Paris. From France polls shifting focus to UK polls, where as United Kingdom gears up for the highly anticipated 2024 snap elections of 4th of July, political parties have launched into full campaign mode, each promising a vision for the future amidst a backdrop of economic recovery and social transformation, so to say. Next report from Hassan tells you more.
The battleground is set for the UK's electoral showdown, with voters facing a choice that could shape the nation's trajectory for years to come. Against the backdrop of Brexit fallout and pandemic recovery, parties are presenting contrasting visions and strategies to win over a diverse electorate. The Conservative Party, led by the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, is campaigning on a platform of economic stability and continued post-Brexit reforms. In response to recent racist comments directed at him, Sunak described the UK as the most successful multi-faith, multi-ethnic democracy.
I think the vast majority of these people in our country rightly believe that it's not the colour of your skin or your background or your gender that defines who you are. You know, the fact that I'm the first British Asian Prime Minister, as you said at the beginning of the segment, is a wonderful thing, but also it's wonderful that it wasn't a big deal. And that's what's so special about our country. I don't think my story would be possible anywhere else.
The Labour Party is advocating for a fairer society through increased investment in public services, job creation and addressing inequality. Their campaign focuses on reversing austerity measures, strengthening health care and tackling climate change. Most polls in Britain have predicted a landslide victory for the Labour Party. Political analysts suggest that this election could mark a turning point for the UK, with widespread dissatisfaction over Conservative policies paving the way for a possible Labour majority in Parliament. The Sunday Times newspaper endorsed the main opposition Labour Party ahead of the July 4 parliamentary elections, arguing in an editorial that the country needs a radical reset after 14 years of Conservative rule. Syed Absarul Hassan reporting for DD India.
DD India's Ollie Barrett joining us live from London. Ollie, you've been tracking these polls so very closely and minutely. Now, first of all, the response to Sunak's response to recent racist remarks directed at him have been in news lately. So he has described UK as multi-faith, multi-ethnic democracy. What has been the reaction from Britain? How has Britain really taken to this?
Well, yeah, we've been hearing from the Prime Minister that he was hurt and angered by the comments from a Reform UK campaigner, which were recorded by the Channel 4 news broadcaster here in the UK. And he's also said that it brings into question the leadership of Nigel Farage when it comes to Reform UK. That is a sentiment that's been echoed by other parties as well. Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, has talked about this raising questions around Nigel Farage's leadership and some of the people in and around the Reform UK political party, which is a new political party for this election here in the UK. From Nigel Farage's perspective, he has responded to some of the anger that has been provoked by those comments by insisting that any bad apples, as he calls them, in the Reform UK party will be dealt with. And he says that, for example, the campaigner that was recorded making these racist comments has been removed from the party and won't be taking any further involvement. Opponents of Reform UK say that this episode shows that the party has some problematic members and people working on its behalf. As I say, Nigel Farage insisting that when you do set up a new political party like this, that you are going to have some difficulties with some of the people connected to it, particularly in the early stages. For Reform, they are trying to get some MPs into the House of Commons after July the 4th. They have had one MP already, but that was a defection from the Conservative Party rather than having won a constituency election for Westminster. So it'll be very interesting indeed to see whether Reform UK have been dented by this controversy in recent days. It's a little bit too early to tell from the polling as to whether Reform may have suffered or not as a result of the comments that Rishi Sunak felt so angered by. And it may well be that we don't really know until July the 4th, July the 5th itself, when the results start coming in.
Right. Having said that, would you agree, Ollie, that most polls there suggest that these elections have seen widespread dissatisfaction over Conservative policies? We have earlier also talked about it, in a way paving way for possible Labour majority in Parliament. And the latest that we hear from Sunak camp, he seems to be making last-ditch efforts to make a comeback of sorts. Is that possible for him now?
It's not impossible. It's very, very difficult indeed, Sakal, for Rishi Sunak and his Conservatives, according to all of the polling that we've had recently, but also throughout the campaign and indeed before he called the snap election. He was trying, when he called the election, he was hoping that he was going to be able to close that gap, that the election campaign would see him take his case to the people, would get some momentum going for the Conservatives, but it just hasn't happened according to all of the polling. All of the polling suggests that Labour are on course for a parliamentary majority and potentially a very large one indeed. All of that said, the usual caveat applies, which is that the polling isn't always accurate. There could be a surprise of some sort in store when the British people actually go to the polls on July the 4th, but all of the polling does point towards a Labour win. One of the things that the Labour Party have been trying to do as a result of their large gap in the polling over the Conservatives is get their vote out. They don't want Labour supporters or people who are minded to vote Labour on July the 4th feeling as though this is already done and dusted, as though this is already over. And the danger for Labour is that if too many people up and down the country who might be supportive of their policies and might be minded to vote for them don't bother to go to the polls because they think the result is already secure, that could be dangerous for the Labour Party. So one of the things we will see in the coming days is an attempt by Labour in particular to make sure that people supportive of them do actually get out and vote when Thursday comes around.
All right, we'll leave it there. Many thanks, Ollie Barrett, for explaining to us the tone and tenor of these unprecedented polls in UK. Thank you. And still to come on DT India News Hour, coming up next, a Taliban delegation attends a UN-led meeting in Qatar on Afghanistan. Women excluded. Russian forces take over 2 villages in Ukraine's Donetsk region. And former US President Donald Trump's bid for criminal immunity from prosecution is set to be decided on Monday by the US top court. You're watching TT India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and let's get you some update on Israel-Gaza. Israeli forces have intensified their operations in Gaza amidst ongoing clashes, with Prime Minister Netanyahu reiterating the operations will persist until its objectives are met. Meanwhile, the US ambassador toured aid facilities in Arish and the Rafah border crossing, while Pentagon has paused Gaza pier operations, citing logistical challenges. Rabindra Chauhan of DD India gets us more.
As the West Asia conflict continues, Israeli forces advanced further on Sunday into the Shejaiya neighborhood of northern Gaza and also pushed deeper into western and central Rafah in the south. Israeli tanks, which moved back into Shejaiya 4 days ago, fired shells towards several targets. The Israeli military said forces operating in Shejaiya had over the past day killed several Palestinian gunmen, located weapons, and struck military infrastructure. Meanwhile, just a day after a Hamas official reported no progress in ceasefire talks, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday stated that Israel is committed to fighting until achieving all goals. Backing hostage release deal that US President Joe Biden presented, Netanyahu said Hamas is the only obstacle to the release of our hostages.
Our forces are operating in Rafah, in Shejaiya, everywhere in Gaza Strip. Every day they are eliminating dozens of terrorists. This is a difficult struggle that is being waged above ground, sometimes in face-to-face battles, and it is also being waged underground. We are committed to fighting until we achieve our goal. There is no change in Israel's position regarding the release outline that President Biden welcomed. And today everyone knows the simple truth: Hamas is the only obstacle to freeing our hostages.
U.S. ambassador to Egypt visited aid facilities in Arish and the Rafah border crossing on Sunday. Meanwhile, the Pentagon announced on Friday that the U.S. military's pier off Gaza was removed due to sea conditions, stating it would not return until aid from a nearby marshalling area reaches Gaza residents. On the other hand, Israel's finance minister has extended a crucial waiver allowing cooperation between Israeli and Palestinian banks in the West Bank. Originally set to expire at the end of June, the waiver permits Israeli banks to process shekel payments for the Palestinian Authority's services and salaries, preventing significant economic disruption. Rabindra Chauhan's report for DD India.
Sarah Coates is joining us live from Tel Aviv. Sarah, first of all, what more information are you picking up as far as the volatility and the way Gaza border continues to be simmering with these clashes, especially the north?
Hello, I'll bring you the situation with regards to the north of the Gaza Strip to begin with. We do know that this operation in the Shujaiya refugee camp has been going on since Thursday, and there have been casualties, of course, on both sides. The Israeli military says that over the past couple of days, some 40 Hamas fighters have been killed in this operation that it is calling a pinpoint operation, saying basically that Hamas fighters have regrouped in this area over the past few weeks, while the IDF also says that it's found extra Hamas infrastructure. Now, we did hear from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He says that fighting is happening above ground, underground, and sometimes there's hand-to-hand fighting, adding that Israeli forces will continue to fight in the Gaza Strip until absolute victory. But of course, this is concerning for these people who need to move out of that area. But once again, this is an area that the Israeli military says Hamas fighters have regrouped in after the military cleared it some months ago.
Netanyahu seems to be very clear that there's not going to be any letdown till the goals are achieved, quote unquote. He's talked about no change in Israel's position regarding the release outlined that President Biden has welcomed. We showed that in the report also. What more information can you share with us?
Well, there is, of course, a lot of hope that some sort of a ceasefire may come into play in the Gaza Strip, with this, of course, having follow-on consequences as potentially bringing the situation on Israel's northern border also under control. And this is the area that is of grave concern to international players right now. We have been hearing that rocket sirens have been activated over the last few minutes in these northern Israeli communities that are largely evacuated, with unconfirmed reports that at least 9 Israeli soldiers have been injured in an explosive-laden drone attack. So there is a lot of concern that any kind of miscalculation between Israel and Hezbollah could potentially tip the region into an all-out conflict. And there have been threats levelled by Israeli and Iranian officials over the past few days, warning of an obliterating war if Israeli soldiers do in fact go into Lebanon. Now, we also do need to tell you that the main hospitals in Israel's north, they've all been put on war mode, with staff at, say, the Galilee Hospital and also the Rambam Hospital in Haifa. They have been drilling for a mass casualty event where many, many people could come through these doors. So certainly this is a very concerning situation at this hour. Diplomatic efforts are failing. But once again, you mentioned this ceasefire. It doesn't look likely at this hour, but if in fact this were to happen, this could potentially bring tensions down on that northern border too.
All right. As of now, thank you, Sarah, for joining us live on Tel Aviv and bringing us up to speed with the situation there, particularly at the border. In other news, the Taliban delegation on Sunday attended United Nations-led meeting in Qatar on Afghanistan after organizers said women would be excluded from the gathering. The two-day meeting is the third UN-sponsored gathering on the Afghan crisis in Qatari capital of Doha. Zabihullah Mujahid, the chief spokesman for the Taliban government who leads its delegation, wrote on social media platform X that the delegation met with representatives from various countries on the sidelines of the meeting. The Taliban were not invited to the first meeting, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said they set unacceptable conditions for attending the second one in February, including demands that Afghan civil society members be excluded from the talks and that the Taliban be treated as the country's legitimate rulers. The meeting is being attended by envoys from some 25 countries and will be the third such meeting in Doha, but the very first attended by Taliban, and that's what makes it extremely crucial and important. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is on a day-long visit to Qatar. Dr. S. Jaishankar held talks with Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman bin Jassim Al Thani in Doha on Sunday and reviewed bilateral relationship with a focus on political trade, investment, energy, technology, culture and people-to-people ties. The EAM conveyed the greetings and warm wishes of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the Amir of Qatar and the Qatar Prime Minister. The External Affairs Minister exchanged views on regional and global issues, and both of them appreciated Qatar Finance Minister's insights on the Gaza situation. The India's External Affairs Minister looked forward to the further enhancement of India-Qatar relationship and continued dialogue on issues of mutual interest. My colleague Vinod joins us live from DD India's Vinod, joining us live from Dubai to tell us more about. Hi Vinod, good evening. The more details as far as External Affairs Minister's engagements and with the top talking heads in Qatar are considered, and most importantly, the significance of this visit.
Hi Sakal, this visit is a very short visit, maybe an extended half-day visit, but it comes at a very crucial time for India and Qatar relations. This trip follows Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Qatar earlier this February, highlighting the importance that India gives to this Gulf nation. The visit has been frequent. The Prime Minister had met Qatar Amir during the sidelines of COP28, and we have already know how 8 Indian naval sailors are released from Qatar after these high-level visits from our Prime Minister. And this particular visit of Dr. S. Jaishankar is set against a backdrop of several key developments. On main development is on the defense front. A few days back, a Qatar delegation was there in India for a sale of 20 Mirage 2000 aircraft. These are the same aircraft which are used in the Balakot strikes, and this will definitely bolster India's Air Force and our strike capability. In the energy sector, earlier this year in Goa, we had signed a landmark deal of $78 billion with Qatar for extending the LNG imports for another 20 years from 2028 until 2048. This particular deal is set in a more favorable terms of India, and it demonstrates the strategic importance that India gives to Qatar. Qatar is one of the largest exporters of LNG across the world. At the same time, India's largest exporter too.
Okay.
We import almost 50% of the LNG from a single state of Qatar. And India's Look West policy and India's growing ambition in the Arabian Sea, and India has been doing military exercises with most of the Gulf states like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the UAE. So all these material and non-material facts concern Qatar is an important ally and strategic partner in this Middle East.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Vinod, for joining us from Dubai and sharing those details as to what makes EAM's visit crucial and significant. Shifting focus to Iran, as new candidates secured 50% of the votes, the country is all set to hold a runoff presidential polls on 5th of July to elect the successor to President Ibrahim Raisi, who died in a helicopter crash earlier this year. DD India's Jessica Taneja gets us more.
Friday's presidential election registered a historic low turnout ever since Islamic Revolution gripped Iran in 1979. Out of 60 million registered voters, only 19.2 million cast their ballot, leading to a runoff presidential election between two candidates who received maximum votes.
We hope that the two dear volunteers who will present themselves for the people's vote again next Friday in their headquarters at the start of the week as in the previous round will comply fully with all the legal standards and good morals, and that we will witness another election worthy of the Islamic Republic.
Reformist Masood Pezeshkian secured a lead of over 1 million votes against the conservative hardliner Saeed Jalili, backed by the Guardian Council. While some voters in Tehran want their next president to take positive steps for the country, others still distrust America and want the two candidates to focus on policy and plans to energize Iran's crippling economy.
My expectation, like other people of this nation, is relative welfare, in a way that at least when you put in the effort, you don't step backwards.
My expectation is that the incoming president should take positive steps for the country, meaning he should be a people person and be practical, not just words-based, but he should act on what he says.
Both Masood Pezeshkian and Saeed Jalili will be tasked with navigating a solution for economic hardships and social restrictions leading to a close contest next week. Bureau Report, DD India.
World. Greek firefighters battled wildfire in south of Athens on Sunday amid strong winds just hours after managing to contain blazes in a mountainous area on the island in the Aegean Sea. Dozens of firefighters backed up by 17 water-carrying aircrafts fought to tame the new fire in a sparsely populated area near the town of Kirati. Spanish police has ended the search operation for British teenager Jay Slater, who has been missing on the Canary Islands on Tenerife. 19 years old, Slater went missing on 17th June and his phone was last tracked or traced to the Masca ravine in a remote national park on the Canary Islands archipelago. Acrobats attempted to break the world record of trampoline jump over Jubilanica River in Slovenia's capital as crowds watched the entertaining performances. 2 trampolines were set over the river and locals could even cross the river using a trampoline bridge. Floods and landslides hit the Italian commune of Noasca as several days of heavy rain caused rivers to overflow. The harsh weather has led to flooding in several parts of northern Italy as well as Switzerland. And still to come on DD India News Hour, coming up next. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban presents a new alliance with Austrian and Czech nationalist parties. And Burl, the first major 2024 hurricane, brings life-threatening winds to Caribbean.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and before we move on, a quick recap of the headlines. In France, first round of polling to elect 577 members of the country's National Assembly underway. National Rally Party far right eyes historic wins. Second round likely to take place on July 7th. Over in Gaza, Israeli forces intensify their operations amid clashes. US envoy inspects aid facilities at Rafah border crossing, while Pentagon pauses Gaza pier operations, citing logistical challenges. India's Prime Minister addresses first Mann Ki Baat radio address in his third term. Congratulates Election Commission on successful completion of electoral process. Also introduces hashtag Cheer for Bharat for forthcoming Paris Olympics. And India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar holds talks with Qatari Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman bin Jassim Al Thani. Discussions revolving around bilateral cooperation, areas of trade, investment and energy. Austria's far-right Freedom Party, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban and the populist Czech ANO party led by Andrej Babis are forming a new alliance in the European Parliament. Now, this move would record but possibly also split nationalist forces in the Assembly, provided 4 more parties join in. Parties from at least a quarter of the European Union's 27 member states are needed to officially form a new political bloc. While Orban has remained outside larger groupings since it parted ways with the mainstream centre-right European People's Party in 2021. Former Czech Prime Minister Babis says the new group would be called Patriots of Europe. Shifting focus to the latest on Russia-Ukraine conflict, where Russian forces have taken over 2 villages in Ukraine's Donetsk region, and the Russian air defense forces have shot down 1 Ukrainian MiG-29 fighter jet and destroyed 36 drones launched overnight, targeting several regions in Russia's southwest. Meanwhile, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that its forces had 90 combat engagements on the front line over the past 24 hours. Ukrainian drones also targeted Russian steel-making facility in a raid in the early hours of Sunday, sustaining no serious damage. Shifting focus to developments as a run-up to the presidential polls in the United States, former U.S. President Donald Trump's bid for criminal immunity from prosecution for trying to overturn his 2020 election loss is all set to be decided on Monday by the U.S. Supreme Court. However, it rules the court has already helped the former president in his effort to avoid trial before November 5 elections. The ruling from the court, whose 6-3 conservative majority includes 3 justices appointed by Trump, it will be released 20 weeks after he seeks relief from the justice. The timeline of the ruling likely does not leave enough time for special counsel Jack Smith to try Trump on the federal 4-count indictment obtained last August, and for a jury to reach a verdict before voters head to the polls. Former federal prosecutors are of the opinion that the amount of delay that has resulted has made it almost impossible to get the case to trial before the U.S. hits polls, adding that the court should have treated it with much more urgency than it did. Trump is a Republican candidate, remember, challenging Democratic President Joe Biden in 2020 election rematch. He is the first former U.S. president to be criminally prosecuted and already has been convicted in the case in New York State Court involving hush money, which was paid to the porn star before 2016 elections. And in case he regains the presidency, Trump could try to force an end to the special counsel's case or potentially pardon himself for any federal crimes. Hurricane Beryl has rapidly strengthened into a formidable Category 3 storm, marking the first hurricane of 2024 Atlantic season. As of Sunday morning, the National Hurricane Center has classified Beryl as very dangerous, warning of its imminent impact on Barbados and the Windward Islands. Located around 675 kilometers southeast of Barbados, Hurricane Beryl boasts maximum sustained winds reaching 155 kilometers per hour. Junior doctors in England are on strike with just days to go until the UK general polls. They are taking industrial action over pay, disrupting thousands of operations and hospital appointments. Junior doctors seek a 35% pay increase due to years of below inflation pay rises or pay freezes. DD India's Ollie Barrett reports from London.
Well, junior doctors' union representatives say that they deserve a 35% pay increase because of years, they say, of below inflation pay rises or even pay freezes. Now, the UK government has said throughout the negotiations with junior doctors that they believe that 35% is too much, that it would be potentially inflationary, and they don't believe that it is a reasonable demand to give into. The union has been criticised for calling this strike in the middle of an election campaign. NHS bosses in England say it's impossible for the government to be involved in negotiations while we are in the final days of an election campaign, and so they say that the strike is harmful, is causing major disruption at a time when there is no way that the government would be able to solve this dispute with the unions. Now, the opposition Labour Party may well be in government within a matter of days, according to all of the polling, but actually Labour say they also would not go ahead with a 35% pay rise for junior doctors. They say that it would have to be significantly lower than that. All of that said, the junior doctors union representatives have sounded a bit more optimistic that with a Labour government in power, if that's what we have after July the 4th, that they might be able to come to some sort of resolution. Labour have criticised the Conservatives for not solving the dispute earlier, but the Conservatives have criticised Labour for claiming that they would be able to solve the dispute without explaining how exactly they would do that, given that they also say they wouldn't want to go ahead with a 35% pay rise. All of this, though, illustrates the kind of difficulties that will face whoever gets into power after July the 4th. Ollie Barrett in London reporting for DD India.
Some news coming in from Kenya, where activists have called for a fresh protest demanding President Ruto's resignation. The protests claim the vice is the reason many young people lack jobs in Kenya. The movement has threatened to mobilize more youngsters to turn to the streets. The Kenyan government has maintained heavy military and police deployment on the streets to stop any further violent protests. DD India's Isabel Nakiria has more inputs from Kampala.
Kenya are planning to press harder with demands that President Ruto resigns after failing to make reforms to fight corruption in the country. The protesters claim the vice is the reason many young people in Kenya do not have jobs. The movement has threatened to mobilize more people to return to the streets. Protesters in rural Kenya are reportedly attacking homes and farms of legislators who voted to pass the bill. Now, on Wednesday, President Ruto conceded to demands to drop the finance bill after a nationwide protest that resulted into loss of lives and property. The government was hoping to plug a budget deficit of $2.7 billion by raising taxes to reduce borrowing. Now, the president has directed the Treasury to draft a supplementary budget to cover revenue shortfalls brought by the rejected finance bill. Now, the government has also maintained heavy military and police deployment on the streets to stop any further violent protest. The president is meeting civil society groups to forge a way forward. He will also be meeting with young people to hear suggestions from them. Isabel Nakiria in Kampala, reporting for DD India.
In news from India now, in a new milestone in India's defence line of credit to Bangladesh, Bangladesh Navy signed a contract for Made in India 800 tons ocean-going tug with India's premier defence public sector undertaking. The Garden reached shipbuilders and engineers in Dhaka on Sunday. The signing coincides with the visit of India's Chief of Naval Staff Admiral Dinesh K. Tripathi to Bangladesh. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi shared his thoughts with the countrymen in India and abroad in his monthly Mann Ki Baat radio broadcast. Today's episode of Mann Ki Baat was the first after Prime Minister Modi assumed office for the third successive term. Prime Minister Modi touched upon various issues of social and cultural importance with the citizens of India.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Mann Ki Baat, the monthly radio broadcast, resumed on Sunday. Sharing his thought, Prime Minister Modi said, Mann Ki Baat radio program may have been paused for a few months, but the spirit of Mann Ki Baat in the country and society carried on relentlessly. Prime Minister Narendra Modi thanked the citizens of the country to show their faith in democracy and participated in the world's largest democratic exercise.
मैं आज देशवासियों को धन्यवाद भी करता हूं कि उन्होंने हमारे संविधान और देश की लोकतांत्रिक व्यवस्थाओं पर अपना अटूट विश्वास दोहराया है। 24 का चुनाव दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा चुनाव था। दुनिया के किसी भी देश में इतना बड़ा चुनाव कभी नहीं हुआ, जिसमें 65 करोड़ लोगों ने वोट डाले हैं। मैं चुनाव आयोग और मतदान की प्रक्रिया से जुड़े हर व्यक्ति को इसके लिए बधाई देता हूं।
Noting the importance of 30th of June for Santals, that is celebrated as Hool Divas or Rebellion Day, Prime Minister Modi remembered the indomitable courage of Veer Sidhu Kanhu, who led the rebellion and fought against the British regime.
30 जून का यह दिन बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। इस दिन को हमारे आदिवासी भाई बहन हूल दिवस के रूप में मनाते हैं। यह दिन वीर सिद्धो कान्हू के अदम्य साहस से जुड़ा है, जिन्होंने विदेशी शासकों के अत्याचार का पुरजोर विरोध किया था।
India launched a special campaign, Ek Ped Maa Ke Naam, on World Environment Day this year. Prime Minister Modi appealed to everyone to plant a tree along with their mothers or in their name under this campaign.
इस वर्ष विश्व पर्यावरण दिवस पर एक विशेष अभियान शुरू किया गया है। इस अभियान का नाम है एक पेड़ मां के नाम। मैंने भी एक पेड़ अपनी मां के नाम लगाया है। मैंने सभी देशवासियों से, दुनिया के सभी देशों के लोगों से ये अपील की है कि अपनी मां के साथ मिलकर या उनके नाम पर एक पेड़ जरूर लगाएं।
Prime Minister Modi also mentioned the importance of Sanskrit as it played a big role in the progress of ancient Indian knowledge and science. Prime Minister Modi urged countrymen to connect the ancient language in their daily life.
आज 30 जून को आकाशवाणी का संस्कृत बुलेटिन अपने प्रसारण के 50 साल पूरे कर रहा है। मैं ऑल इंडिया रेडियो परिवार को बधाई देता हूं। साथियों, संस्कृत की प्राचीन भारतीय ज्ञान और विज्ञान की प्रगति में बड़ी भूमिका रही है। आज के समय की मांग है कि हम संस्कृत को सम्मान भी दें और उसे अपने दैनिक जीवन से भी जोड़ें।
Prime Minister Modi also spoke about Indian heritage celebrated by Suriname and St. Vincent and Grenadines. He also thanked Kuwait government for a radio show dedicated to the Indian culture. The 10th International Day of Yoga celebrations was also mentioned by Prime Minister Modi in Mann Ki Baat program. The radio broadcast was last aired on February 25th and then took a break for general elections. Bureau Report, DD India.
And still to come on DD India News Hour, coming up next. India's Sports Minister Mansukh Mandavia hosts India's Olympic-bound athletes in New Delhi. You're watching DD India News Hour and I'm Sakal Bhatt, and let's move on to some other news and updates. While sharing his thoughts with the nation in his 111th episode of Mann Ki Baat radio broadcast, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi also spoke about the Indian products which are in great demand across the world. He especially mentioned Araku coffee of Andhra Pradesh down south, which has received many global awards, and snow peas of Kashmir.
भारत के कितने ही प्रोडक्ट्स हैं जिनकी दुनिया भर में बहुत डिमांड है, और जब हम भारत के किसी लोकल प्रोडक्ट को ग्लोबल होते देखते हैं तो गर्व से भर जाना स्वाभाविक है। ऐसा ही एक प्रोडक्ट है अराकू कॉफी। अराकू कॉफी की खेती से करीब 1.5 लाख आदिवासी परिवार जुड़े हुए हैं। दिल्ली में हुई G20 समिट में भी कॉफी छाई हुई थी। आपको जब भी अवसर मिले आप भी अराकू कॉफी का आनंद जरूर लें। साथियों, लोकल प्रोडक्ट को ग्लोबल बनाने में हमारे जम्मू कश्मीर के लोग भी पीछे नहीं हैं। पिछले महीने जम्मू कश्मीर ने जो कर दिखाया है वो देश भर के लोगों के लिए भी एक मिसाल है। यहाँ के पुलवामा से स्नो पीज की पहली खेप लंदन भेजी गई।
India's justice system is getting a major reform with the new laws, 3 new laws replacing colonial era codes. These aim for fast trials, mandatory forensics and more victim-friendly system. Our next report brings you more.
For over a century, India's criminal justice system operated under the shadow of its colonial past. Sluggish case processing and limited victim rights plagued the system. However, a recent revolution is rewriting the narrative. In 2024, India ushered in a new era with the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita and Bharatiya Sakshat Adhiniyam. These new laws replace the archaic British-era codes, aiming to streamline processes, empower victims and deliver swifter justice. Gone are the days of victims spending hours filing complaints. The cornerstone of this reform lies in speed and transparency. Today, a few clicks on a phone app can initiate the process. This online FIR or First Information Report system not only saves time but also empowers victims, especially those in remote areas or facing mobility limitations. But the reforms extend far beyond convenience. The new laws prioritize victims' rights, placing them at the center of the legal process. Witness protection programs ensure safety, and courts must consider victim input before dismissing a case. This shift in focus acknowledges the emotional and psychological toll crimes inflict. Furthermore, the system is becoming more inclusive. Elderly individuals, women, and people with disabilities no longer face the additional burden of navigating crowded police stations. Investigations can now be conducted in the comfort of their homes, a small yet significant step towards accessibility. Technology can also play a crucial role in the new system. Mandatory forensics for serious crimes ensures stronger evidence collection, potentially leading to higher conviction rates. Additionally, virtual court appearances allow for swifter proceedings and eliminates the stress of travel for victims and witnesses. However, like any other major reform, challenges persist. Ensuring proper implementation across the vast and diverse Indian landscape is paramount. Concerns regarding potential misuse of police power also requires vigilant monitoring. Despite these hurdles, the new legal framework represents a significant leap forward. India's criminal justice system is no longer an archaic relic, but a system striving to be faster, fairer, and more respectful of all those who seek its protection. This is a revolution with the potential to transform the lives of millions, offering them the hope of a justice system that truly works for them. Bureau Report, DD India.
And now let's take a look at other stories making news. The Central Bureau of Investigation on Sunday interrogated the accused at Bure Central Jail in Patna in North Indian state of Bihar in the alleged question paper leak case of the NEET UGC examination. So far, the agency has arrested 5 suspects from state of Bihar and Jharkhand. Experts in the water resources sector from the United States and Canada visited the Polavaram project in the South Indian state of Andhra Pradesh. Experts inspected the project site, including the diaphragm wall, the 2 coffee dams and the guide bund. And now you're watching DD India News Hour. It's time for some sports news. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has conveyed his best wishes to Olympics-bound athlete 2024 Paris Games. They kick off on 26th of July.
अगले महीने इस समय तक पेरिस ओलंपिक शुरू हो चुके होंगे। मुझे विश्वास है कि आप सब भी ओलंपिक खेलों में भारतीय खिलाड़ियों का उत्साह बढ़ाने का इंतजार कर रहे होंगे। मैं भारतीय दल को ओलंपिक खेलों की बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। हम सबके मन में टोक्यो ओलंपिक की यादें अब भी ताज़ा हैं। टोक्यो में हमारे खिलाड़ियों के प्रदर्शन ने हर भारतीय का दिल जीत लिया था। टोक्यो ओलंपिक के बाद से ही हमारे एथलीट्स पेरिस ओलंपिक की तैयारियों में जी जान से जुटे हुए थे। सभी खिलाड़ियों को मिला दें तो इन सब ने करीब 900 इंटरनेशनल कंपटीशन में हिस्सा लिया है। ये काफी बड़ी संख्या है।
And with just less than a month to the mega sporting event Paris Olympics 2024, India's Minister for Youth Affairs and Sports Mansukh Mandavia hosted the Olympic-bound athletes at a send-off ceremony on Sunday in New Delhi. Mandavia also unveiled the kit for the mega event, which will be donned by the athletes throughout the tournament and at the glittering opening ceremony in Paris. Speaking at the occasion, Union Sports Minister said that I wish all the players very best. The minister said that players' participation in Olympics will make the entire country proud.
ड्रेस पहन के भारत का तिरंगा झंडा लेके जब आप ओलंपिक में हमारी टीम के साथ उतरेंगे, दोस्तों ये देश के गौरव का प्रतीक होगा। दोस्तों जब स्पोर्ट्स के लिए खेलने के लिए जाते हैं, देश के लिए भी आपका प्रतिनिधित्व ओलंपिक्स में 140 करोड़ की जनता को गौरव देगा।
And that's it in this edition of DD India News Hour. But let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And especially for those of you on the go, you can always get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screens. You just saw that on to download now. And we will be back with more news and updates as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Sakal Bhatt from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.